Clara Jennings dropped to her knees in the snow, pulling the frozen child against her chest. The little girl wasn't breathing. "No," Clara whispered, pressing her cheek to the ice-cold forehead. "Not again. Please God, not again." Behind her, the stranger's voice cut through the wind. "There's more. 19 more. Still locked in that wagon." Clara's hands stopped shaking. She looked up at him, snow catching in her graying hair. "Then why are we still standing here? If you want to see how far this story travels, subscribe now and comment your city below. Let's begin." The knock came after midnight. Clara Jennings sat up in her chair, the Bible slipping from her lap. The fire had burned down to embers, casting the small relay station in shadows. She hadn't meant to fall asleep. She never meant to fall asleep. But the nights were long out here, and the silence had a way of pulling a body under. The knock came again. Harder this time. Clara reached for the shotgun beside the door. "Who's there, ma'am?" A man's voice, rough and strained. "I got a child. She's dying." Clara's hand froze on the latch. "A child." "Please," the voice said. "I ain't got nowhere else to go." She pulled the door open. The wind hit her first bitter cold, carrying snow sideways across the porch. Then she saw him. A tall man in a black coat hat pulled low ice crystals clinging to his beard. In his arms, wrapped in his own jacket, was a small figure. A girl, maybe 7 or 8, with red hair plastered to her pale face. The girl wasn't moving. "Get inside," Clara said. "Now." The man stumbled through the door, nearly falling. Clara slammed it shut behind him and pointed to the cot by the fire. "Put her there. Gentle." He laid the girl down like she was made of glass. Clara dropped to her knees beside the cot, pressing her fingers to the child's neck. The pulse was there, faint fluttering, but there. "She's alive," Clara breathed. "Barely." "How long was she out there?" "Don't know." The man's voice cracked. "Found her on the road 3 miles back, just lying there in the snow, like someone threw her away." Clara didn't look at him. She was already pulling blankets from the chest, piling them over the girl's small body. "Heat water. There's a kettle by the stove." The man didn't move. "Ma'am." "Now." He moved. Clara worked fast, rubbing the girl's hands between her own, trying to force warmth back into those tiny fingers. The child's lips were blue. Her breathing was shallow, rattling in her chest like something broken. "Come on," Clara whispered. "Come on, sweetheart. Stay with me." The girl's eyes fluttered open, green eyes bright with fever and fear. Maggie," the girl rasped. "My name, Maggie." "Maggie." Clara smoothed the hair from the girl's forehead. "That's a beautiful name. I'm Clara. You're safe now." "The others," Maggie whispered. "You have to." "The others?" "What others, honey?" Maggie's hand shot out, gripping Clara's wrist with surprising strength. "The wagon. They're still in the wagon. Tommy. The little ones. They locked us in. They left us." Clara's blood went cold. "Who left you?" "The men." Tears spilled down Maggie's cheeks. "They said we were going to new families. They lied. They locked us in and they left us to die." Clara turned to look at the stranger. He stood by the stove kettle in his hand, his face carved from stone. "How many?" Clara asked. The man's jaw tightened. "She said 19. 19 more children locked in a wagon somewhere out there." Clara stood slowly. Her legs felt weak, but she forced them to hold. "Where?" "I don't know exactly. Somewhere between here and Miller's Pass. The snow was covering the tracks when I found her." "That's 6 miles through the storm." "I know." Clara looked down at Maggie. The girl had closed her eyes again, her grip on Clara's wrist finally loosening. Safe for now, warm for now. But there were 19 more out there in the dark. "They'll be dead by morning," Clara said quietly. "Probably." "So what are you going to do about it?" The man set the kettle down. For the first time, Clara really looked at him. He was older than she'd first thought, late 40s maybe, with deep lines around his eyes and a weariness that went beyond tired. His hands were steady, though, and his eyes, gray as winter sky, held something she recognized. Guilt. "I was hoping," he said slowly. "You might know someone who could help. A sheriff, maybe. Someone with men and horses." "Nearest sheriff is in Socorro. That's 2 days' ride in good weather." Clara shook her head. "There's no one, mister. Just me." "Then I'll go back alone. In this storm you'll freeze before you find them." "Maybe." He reached for his coat, still wet from the snow. "But I can't just leave them out there." Clara grabbed his arm. "Wait." He stopped. She hated what she was about to say. Hated it with everything in her. But the words came anyway, pushed out by something stronger than fear. "I know this territory better than you do. Every trail, every landmark. I've lived here 11 years. She released his arm. "If we go together, we've got a chance. If you go alone, you'll die, and so will they." The man studied her face. "You'd leave the girl." "I'll bank the fire high and lock the door. She's warm now. She'll hold until we get back." Clara grabbed her coat from the hook. "Unless you've got a better idea." He didn't. "What's your name?" Clara asked, pulling on her boots. "Coulter. Elijah Coulter." "Well, Elijah Coulter, I hope you can ride fast." Boom. They pushed the horses hard through the storm. The wind screamed across the open plain, driving snow into their faces like needles. Clara rode ahead, head down, trusting her mare to find the path. Elijah followed close behind his borrowed horse, struggling through the drifts. "How much farther?" he shouted over the wind. "Miller's Pass is just over that ridge. If the wagon's out here, it'll be somewhere in the basin." They crested the ridge and Clara pulled up short. Below them, barely visible through the swirling snow, sat a dark shape. A wagon tilted at an ugly angle, one wheel buried in a drift. The canvas top flapped wildly in the wind. "There," Clara said. They rode down. The closer they got, the worse it looked. The wagon wasn't just stuck, it was wrecked. The axle had snapped, the tongue was broken, and there were no horses anywhere in sight. Whoever had left it here had left it for good. Clara dismounted before her horse fully stopped. "Hello, is anyone there?" No answer. She ran to the back of the wagon, Elijah right behind her. The rear gate was chained shut, a heavy padlock holding it closed. "They locked it," Clara breathed. "They actually locked it." Elijah pulled his revolver and aimed at the padlock. "Stand back." The shot cracked through the storm. The lock shattered. Clara yanked the chain free and threw open the gate. The smell hit her first. Sickness, sweat, fear. And underneath it all, the faint, terrible sweetness of death. Clara climbed into the wagon. They were everywhere. Small bodies huddled together for warmth, piled against each other like discarded dolls. Some moved weakly at the sound of her voice. Others didn't move at all. "Oh, God," Clara whispered. "Oh, dear God." A small hand reached up toward her. A boy, maybe 5 or 6, with dark hair and eyes that stared at nothing. "Ma'am?" The word was barely a sound. Are you an angel?" Clara choked back a sob. "No, sweetheart, I'm not an angel. But I'm here now. I'm here." Elijah climbed in behind her, moving carefully through the tangle of bodies. He pressed his fingers to necks, checked for breath, worked his way through the wagon with grim efficiency. 9, he said finally. 9 alive. The rest. He didn't finish. Clara looked at the still forms, scattered among the living. Children who should have been playing laughing growing up. Children who would never do any of those things again. "We can't carry them all," Clara said. "Not on 2 horses. Then we make trips. In this storm, the ones we leave behind will—" "I know." Elijah's voice was flat. "But we don't have a choice." A small voice cut through the darkness. "I can walk." Clara turned. A girl, maybe 12, was sitting up against the side of the wagon. Her face was hollow, her lips cracked, but her eyes were fierce. I can walk, she said again. So can some of the others. We ain't all dying. Clara moved toward her. What's your name, sweetheart? Ruth Carver. Ruth, how long have you been in here? 3 days, maybe 4. Ruth's hands clenched in her ragged dress. They told us we were going to California. New families, they said. Good homes. Then they drove us out here and just stopped. The men argued about something. Money, I think. Then they unhitched the horses and left. Who were they? Ruth shook her head. Don't know their names, but the one in charge, the one who gave the orders. She paused, something dark flickering across her face. He wore a fancy suit, had a gold watch chain, talked like he was important. Elijah and Clara exchanged a look. We'll find him, Elijah said quietly. But first, we've got to get you all out of here. They worked fast. The children, who could walk, 4 of them, including Ruth, stumbled out of the wagon and stood shivering in the snow. The others were carried one by one, wrapped in blankets and coats, and anything else that might hold warmth. Clara held a boy who couldn't have been more than 4. He weighed almost nothing. His head lolled against her shoulder, and when she looked down at him, she saw her son's face. James. Her James dead these 2 years from fever. Same brown hair, same small chin, same way of curling into her arms like she could protect him from anything. She hadn't protected him. She'd failed. Ma'am? Elijah's voice broke through the memory. You all right? Clara blinked. The snow was falling harder now, and the boy in her arms was shaking. I'm fine, she said. Let's move. The first trip took 3 children, the smallest ones bundled together on Clara's mare. Elijah rode alongside, guiding the horse through the drifts, while Clara walked ahead, breaking trail. By the time they reached the relay station, the sky had begun to lighten. Not sunrise yet, but the first hint of it gray and cold on the eastern horizon. Maggie was awake when they came through the door. You found them, she whispered. You actually found them. We found them. Clara set the boy down on the floor near the fire. But there's more. We've got to go back. Maggie struggled to sit up. I can help. You can stay here and keep them warm. Clara pulled another blanket from the chest and draped it over the children. That's how you help. They made 3 more trips before the storm began to break. Each time, Clara told herself it would be the last. Each time she climbed back on her horse and rode out into the cold again. Because she couldn't leave them. She couldn't stand by while children died. Not again. Not while she had breath in her body and strength in her legs. When the last child was finally inside Ruth, who had insisted on walking. Despite her frozen feet, Clara closed the door and leaned against it. The relay station was chaos. Children everywhere crying, coughing, calling out for people who weren't there. The fire roared in the hearth, and kettles of water steamed on the stove, and the whole room smelled of wet wool and sickness. But they were alive. All 9 of them. Alive. You did good, Elijah said quietly. He stood by the window watching the snow taper off outside. Clara shook her head. 10 are dead. 10 children frozen in that wagon. And 9 are breathing because of you. Because of us. Elijah turned to look at her. In the firelight, she could see the exhaustion carved into his face, and something else too, something like wonder. Why? He asked. Why what? Why did you do it? You don't know these children. You don't owe them anything. You could have stayed here where it was safe. Clara looked across the room at Maggie, who was helping Ruth drink water from a cup. At the small boy who'd asked if she was an angel, now sleeping peacefully by the fire. At all of them, these broken, discarded, precious children. 2 years ago, Clara said slowly, I lost my son, James. He was 10. Elijah said nothing. He got sick. Fever. I sat with him for 3 days watching him slip away. Clara's voice didn't shake. She wouldn't let it. At the end, he looked at me and said, "Mama, you'll be okay. You're strong." And then he was gone. She turned to face Elijah. "I ain't strong. I just couldn't save him, and it's been eating me alive ever since. But tonight, when that little girl told me there were children dying in the snow..." Clara shook her head. "I couldn't sit here and do nothing. Not again. Not ever again." Elijah was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "I understand," he said. "Do you? More than you know." Before Clara could ask what he meant, Ruth's voice cut through the room. "Ma'am, this boy Tommy, he won't stop shaking, and he keeps asking for his sister." Clara crossed the room quickly. Tommy, the dark-haired boy who'd called her an angel, was huddled in a corner, trembling violently. His eyes were open, but unfocused, staring at something no one else could see. "Tommy." Clara knelt beside him. "Tommy, sweetheart, can you hear me?" The boy didn't respond. "He's been like this since we found him," Ruth said quietly. "He hasn't spoken a word. I think his sister was one of the ones who didn't make it." Clara's heart cracked open. She gathered Tommy into her arms, pulling him close against her chest. He didn't resist, just went limp like all the fight had drained out of him. "I've got you," Clara whispered. "I've got you now. You're safe." Tommy's small hand found her sleeve and held on. By mid-morning, the storm had passed. Pale winter sunlight streamed through the windows, making the snow outside sparkle like diamonds. The children were sleeping now, most of them exhausted beyond words. Clara moved among them, checking foreheads, adjusting blankets, doing the small necessary things that mothers do. Elijah sat at the table staring at a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. "We need to report this," he said. "Someone needs to answer for what happened to these children." Clara nodded. "The sheriff in Socorro." "Won't be enough." Elijah's jaw tightened. "Ruth said the man in charge wore a fancy suit, had a gold watch chain. That ain't some drifter or common criminal. That's someone with money, power." "You think someone important did this?" "I think someone important paid for it." Elijah pushed back from the table. "These children were taken from somewhere. Orphanages, probably. Streets. Places where no one would miss them. Then they were shipped out here like cargo." Clara felt sick. "Why?" "Money. There's always money in human misery, ma'am. Factories back east that need small hands. Ranches that need cheap labor. Or worse." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. "So what do we do?" Elijah stood. "I'll ride to Socorro. Talk to the sheriff. Make some noise. And if the sheriff's in on it, if this goes higher than we think, then I'll make more noise." Elijah reached for his coat. "Someone's going to pay for this. I swear it." Clara caught his arm. "Wait." He stopped. "You're exhausted. You've been riding all night. At least rest a few hours before you go. Every hour I wait is an hour they have to cover their tracks. And if you fall off your horse halfway to Socorro, you won't catch anyone." Clara's grip tightened. "Please, just a few hours. The children need someone watching over them anyway. I can't do it alone." Elijah looked at her hand on his arm, then at her face. Something passed between them. Something neither of them had words for yet. "A few hours," he said finally. Clara released him. "There's a cot in the back room. Get some sleep." Elijah nodded and turned to go. At the doorway he paused. "Clara." "Yes. Thank you. For what you did tonight. Those children would be dead without you." Clara shook her head. "They'd be dead without both of us." Elijah almost smiled. Almost. Then he was gone, and Clara was alone with 9 sleeping children and the weight of everything that had happened. She walked to the window and looked out at the snow. Somewhere out there, the men who had done this were walking free, sleeping in warm beds, eating hot meals, living their lives as if 20 children hadn't been left to freeze in the dark. Clara's hands curled into fists. Not for long, she thought. Not if I have anything to say about it." Behind her, Maggie stirred. "Miss Clara?" Clara turned. "Yes, sweetheart." "Are the bad men going to come back?" Clara crossed the room and knelt beside the girl's cot. "No," she said firmly. "They're not coming back." "How do you know?" Clara brushed a strand of red hair from Maggie's forehead. "Because if they do, they'll have to go through me first." Maggie's eyes searched her face. Whatever she found there must have been enough, because slowly she nodded. "Okay," Maggie whispered. "I believe you." Clara tucked the blanket around her. "Get some rest now. You're safe." Maggie closed her eyes. But Clara didn't move. She stayed there kneeling beside the cot watching the girl sleep. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Didn't know if they could find the men responsible, or bring them to justice, or protect these children from whatever came next. But she knew one thing. She wasn't going to fail. Not this time. Not again. Elijah didn't sleep long. Clara heard him moving in the back room barely 2 hours after he'd lain down. She didn't blame him. Sleep was a luxury neither of them could afford, not with 10 dead children buried in snow, and 9 more clinging to life in her front room. He came out looking worse than before. Dark circles under his eyes' shoulders hunched like a man carrying weight that wouldn't let go. "Coffee's hot," Clara said. "Obliged." He poured himself a cup and stood by the window watching the road. Clara watched him. "You ain't just a drifter," she said quietly. "The way you moved last night, the way you checked those children for signs of life. You've done this before." Elijah didn't turn around. "Done what?" "Found the dead, counted the living." His hand tightened on the cup. "I was a ranger, Texas Rangers, 15 years. Quit 3 years back." "Why?" Elijah was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was flat. "Because I got somewhere too late. Family of 5 homestead outside Amarillo. Raiders hit them in the night. By the time I arrived—" He didn't finish. Clara understood. Some stories didn't need endings. "Is that why you stopped for Maggie?" she asked. "On the road last night. I couldn't ride past, not again." Elijah finally turned to look at her. "I've been running from that farmhouse for 3 years, ma'am. Last night I stopped running." Before Clara could respond, Ruth's voice cut through the room. "Someone's coming." Clara moved to the window. A rider was approaching from the south, moving fast. Too fast for a casual traveler. "You expecting anyone?" Elijah asked. "No." He set down his coffee and drew his revolver. "Get the children away from the door." Clara didn't argue. She gathered the little ones quietly, herding them toward the back room. Ruth helped her face pale, but determined. Maggie tried to stand, but Clara pressed her back down. "Stay here," Clara whispered. "Don't make a sound." The knock came hard. 3 sharp raps. Elijah positioned himself beside the door, gun raised. Clara picked up her shotgun and moved to the other side. "Who's there?" she called. "Name's Bennett. Deputy Bennett out of Socorro." The voice was young, nervous. "Looking for a woman named Clara Jennings." Clara and Elijah exchanged a look. She nodded slowly and unlatched the door. The man who stepped inside was barely 25, with a tin star pinned to his coat and a face that hadn't yet learned to hide fear. He stopped short when he saw Elijah's revolver pointed at his chest. "Easy, mister," Bennett said, raising his hands. "I ain't here for trouble." "Then start talking," Elijah said. "Fast." Bennett's eyes darted around the room, taking in the children huddled in the corner, the blankets, the steam rising from kettles on the stove. His face went white. "Lord Almighty," he breathed. "It's true. The children are real." Clara stepped forward. "What do you know about these children?" "Got word this morning. Ryder came into Socorro before dawn, said there'd been an accident on the trail. Wagon full of orphans bound for California. He said the driver got lost in the storm, abandoned them." That ain't what happened, Clara said coldly. These children were locked in that wagon, chained, left to freeze. Bennett's mouth opened, closed. Ma'am, Who sent you? Elijah demanded. Who's asking questions about these children? Sheriff Monroe. He sent me to check on the situation, bring the survivors back to Socorro. Back to Socorro. Elijah's voice was dangerous. So someone can make them disappear. No, sir. So they can get proper care. The sheriff's arranging. The sheriff's arranging nothing. Clara raised her shotgun slightly. These children aren't going anywhere until I know who did this to them. Bennett swallowed hard. Ma'am, I'm just following orders. Whose orders? Elijah stepped closer. Sheriff Monroe's or someone else's? The deputy's face flickered, just for a second, but Clara caught it. There's someone else, she said. Someone above the sheriff. Bennett shook his head. I don't know what you're talking about. You're lying. Ma'am, I've been reading faces for 42 years, deputy. You're scared, and it ain't of us. Clara lowered her shotgun. Who are you really afraid of? Bennett was quiet for a long moment. His hands were shaking. There's a man, he said finally. Comes through Socorro every few months. Rich, important. Folks say he's got connections all the way to the territorial governor. Name, Blackwood. Judge Amos Blackwood. Elijah went still. I know that name. Everyone knows that name, mister. He practically owns half the territory. Bennett's voice dropped. Word is he's been running orphan trains for years, placing children with families out west. Good Christian work, people say. Good Christian work, Clara repeated bitterly. Is that what they call leaving 20 children to die in a blizzard? Bennett flinched. I ain't saying he did this, ma'am. I'm just telling you what I know. Where is he now? Socorro. He arrived 2 days ago, staying at the Grand Hotel. Bennett paused. Sheriff Monroe met with him yesterday. Private meeting. I wasn't allowed in. Clara looked at Elijah. His jaw was tight, his eyes hard. We need to move, he said. If Blackwood knows we found those children, he'll send more than a deputy. Move where? Clara gestured to the room full of children. Half of them can barely walk. Then we make a stand here. Against a judge, against the law. The law ain't comin' to save us, Clara. Elijah's voice was quiet. It never does. Bennett cleared his throat. I could help. Both of them turned to stare at him. What? Clara said. I could help. Bennett's voice was stronger now. I became a deputy because I wanted to do right. This ain't right. 20 children dead or dying, and my sheriff's having private meetings with the man who might have done it. He shook his head. That ain't the law I signed up to serve. Elijah studied him for a long moment. You cross Blackwood, you'll lose your badge. Maybe your life. I know. You got family. No, sir. Just me. Elijah nodded slowly. All right, deputy. You want to help start by telling us everything you know about Judge Blackwood. They talked for an hour. Bennett knew more than Clara expected. Blackwood had been running his orphan placement scheme for nearly a decade, moving children from overcrowded eastern orphanages to loving families in the Western Territories. On paper, it looked legitimate, legal, even noble. But there were rumors. Children who vanished after placement. Families who paid large sums for healthy workers. Ranches and mines that never seemed to lack for small hands to do dangerous work. Nobody investigates, Bennett said. Because nobody cares. These are orphans, ma'am. No parents, no family. No one to ask questions when they disappear. Clara thought of Maggie, of Tommy, of all the small faces in her front room. Someone's asking questions now, she said. A small voice interrupted them. Miss Clara. It was Tommy. He stood in the doorway to the back room, clutching a wooden horse that Ruth had found in his pocket. His eyes were still hollow, but he was looking at Clara. Actually looking. "What is it, sweetheart?" "I remember something." Tommy's voice was barely a whisper. "About the man. The one who locked us in." Clara knelt down to his level. "What do you remember?" "He had a gold watch. He kept checking it, like he was waiting for something." Tommy's hand tightened on the wooden horse. "And he called the other man Silas. He said, 'Silas, make sure they don't make noise.'" Clara looked up at Bennett. "You know anyone named Silas?" Bennett's face went pale. "Silas Webb. He's Blackwood's right-hand man. Does all his dirty work." "Where do we find him?" "You don't. He finds you." Bennett swallowed. "And if he's coming, ma'am, you'd better pray you're ready." As if on cue, Ruth's voice rang out from the window. "Riders, 3 of them, coming fast." Clara was on her feet in an instant. She crossed to the window and looked out. 3 men on horseback approaching from the east. The lead rider was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a long black duster. Even at this distance, Clara could see the cold purpose in his posture. "That's him," Bennett breathed. "That's Silas Webb." Elijah checked his revolver. "How many bullets you got, deputy?" "Full cylinder. 6 shots." "Clara." "Shotgun's loaded. Got a rifle in the back." "Get it." Clara ran to the back room, nearly tripping over children in her haste. She grabbed the rifle from its rack, checked the chamber, and ran back. The riders had stopped 50 yards from the station. Silas Webb dismounted. He was bigger than Clara had expected, with arms like tree trunks and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. The 2 men with him stayed mounted, hands resting on their weapons. "Clara Jennings." Webb's voice carried across the snow. "We ain't here for trouble. Just want to talk." Clara moved to the door. Elijah grabbed her arm. "Don't. If I don't answer, they'll come in shooting." "Let them try." "There are children in here, Elijah." Clara's voice was steady. "I won't let them die in a crossfire." She pulled free and opened the door. Webb smiled when he saw her. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "Mrs. Jennings, pleasure to meet you." He took a step forward. "Heard you found some lost children last night. Very Christian of you." "They weren't lost. They were abandoned." "Tragic misunderstanding. The driver panicked in the storm, made some poor decisions." Webb spread his hands. "We're here to take the children to safety. Get them proper care." "They're getting proper care right here." "I'm sure they are. But these children are wards of the territory. They need to be processed, documented, placed with appropriate families." Webb's smile widened. "It's the law, ma'am." "The law." Clara's grip tightened on her rifle. "Is that what you call locking children in a wagon and leaving them to freeze?" Webb's smile didn't waver. "I don't know anything about that." "Then you won't mind answering some questions about Judge Blackwood, about the orphan trains, about where those children were really going." Something flickered in Webb's eyes, just for a second. "You're making accusations you can't prove, ma'am." "Maybe. But I've got 9 witnesses in this house who might have something to say." Webb glanced at the window. Clara could see him calculating, weighing options. "Those children are confused," he said slowly. "Traumatized. Anything they say would be unreliable." "Then you've got nothing to worry about." Webb was silent for a long moment. Then he laughed. A cold, hollow sound. "You've got spirit, Mrs. Jennings. I respect that." He took another step forward. "But spirit won't save you. Not out here. Not against the kind of people I work for." "Maybe not," Clara said. "But I reckon I'll take my chances." Webb's smile faded. "Last chance, ma'am. Hand over the children. Walk away. Nobody gets hurt." "No." Webb sighed. "Wrong answer." He moved fast, faster than Clara expected. His hand went for his gun, and Clara raised her rifle, and somewhere behind her, Elijah shouted a warning, and then everything happened at once. The shot came from inside the house. Bennett firing through the window. One of Webb's men jerked backward in his saddle, clutching his shoulder. Webb dove for cover behind his horse. The third man returned fire bullets, punching through the wooden walls of the station. Clara dropped to the ground, crawling back toward the door. "Get the children down!" Elijah was already moving, pulling children away from the windows, shoving them toward the back room. Ruth grabbed Tommy and ran. Maggie screamed. Another shot. Another. The air filled with smoke and thunder. Clara made it inside and slammed the door. A bullet splintered the wood inches from her head. "Bennett!" "I'm hit." The deputy was crouched by the window, blood streaming from his arm. "Just a graze. I'm fine." Elijah appeared at her side. "We can't hold them off forever. They'll circle around, hit us from the back. Then we make them pay for every inch." Clara moved to the window and raised her rifle. Webb was behind his horse reloading. She took aim and fired. The bullet caught his hat, sending it spinning into the snow. Webb looked up, his eyes meeting hers through the glass. The look on his face promised death. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," he shouted. "Blackwood will burn this place to the ground. Let him try. More shots." The third rider was moving, circling toward the back of the station. Clara heard glass shatter somewhere in the rear. "They're coming in the back!" Ruth screamed. Elijah ran toward the sound. A moment later, Clara heard the boom of his revolver, followed by a cry of pain. Then silence. Elijah reappeared, breathing hard. "Got him! But there'll be more!" Webb's voice came from outside. "This ain't over, Jennings. You hear me? This ain't over." Hoofbeats, fading into the distance. Clara lowered her rifle and turned to look at the room. Bennett was slumped against the wall, clutching his wounded arm. Ruth was huddled in the corner with the younger children, her face streaked with tears. Tommy sat perfectly still, staring at nothing. And Maggie. Maggie was lying on the floor, eyes closed, blood spreading across her chest. "No!" Clara dropped her rifle and ran to the girl. "No, no, no!" She fell to her knees, pulling Maggie into her arms. The girl's breathing was shallow, ragged. Blood soaked through her dress, warm and terrible. "Clara." Elijah's voice was gentle. "Clara, let me see." "She's just a child. She's just a little girl." "I know. Let me see." Clara forced herself to release Maggie. Elijah examined the wound quickly, his face grim. Bullet went through the wall, caught her in the side. He pressed his hand against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "It's bad, but it missed the lung. If we can get her to a doctor—" "The nearest doctor is in Socorro," Clara said. 2 days' ride. Then we ride. In this weather, she'll never make it." "She won't make it if we stay here either." Clara looked down at Maggie's pale face. The girl's eyes fluttered open. "Miss Clara, I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here." "Did we win?" Clara choked back a sob. "We won, Maggie. We won." Maggie smiled weakly. "Good. I knew you would." Her eyes closed again. Clara looked at Elijah. "What do we do?" "We pray," he said quietly. "And we fight." Ruth stepped forward. "There's another way." Everyone turned to look at her. "My mama was a healer," Ruth said. "Before she died, she taught me some things. How to clean wounds, how to stop bleeding." She swallowed hard. "I ain't a doctor, but I can help." Clara stared at her. This 12-year-old girl, half-starved and traumatized, offering to save a life. "Are you sure?" Ruth nodded. "I'm sure." Elijah stood. "Tell me what you need." "Hot water, clean cloth, whiskey if you have it." Ruth knelt beside Maggie, her small hands surprisingly steady. "And someone to hold her down. This is going to hurt." They worked through the night. Ruth cleaned the wound with whiskey while Maggie screamed. Clara held the girl, still whispering words of comfort that felt hollow and useless. Elijah boiled bandages and passed them to Ruth, his face pale in the firelight. Bennett, his arm crudely bandaged, kept watch at the window. By dawn, Maggie was still alive. Barely. Ruth sat back exhausted, her hands stained with blood. "I've done what I can. The rest is up to her." Clara looked at the small figure on the cot. Maggie's face was gray, her breathing shallow but steady. For now. "Thank you," Clara whispered. Ruth shook her head. "Don't thank me yet." Elijah appeared at Clara's side. "We need to talk." They stepped outside into the cold morning air. The snow had stopped, but the wind still cut like a knife. "Webb will come back," Elijah said. "And he'll bring more men. Blackwood won't let this go, not now." "I know. We need help. Real help. The kind that carries guns and isn't afraid to use them." "Where are we going to find that?" Elijah was quiet for a moment. "There's a man I know. Marshal named Harrison. Federal. Operates out of Santa Fe." "Federal marshal?" "Blackwood's got the territorial law in his pocket. But federal law is different. If we can get word to Harrison, tell him what's happening." "It's a long shot. It's the only shot we've got." Clara looked back at the station. Through the window, she could see Ruth sitting beside Maggie, keeping vigil. "All right," Clara said. "How do we reach him?" "I'll ride. It's 3 days to Santa Fe if I push hard." 3 days there. 3 days back. That's 6 days, Elijah. Can we hold out that long? Do we have a choice? Clara closed her eyes. The wind pulled at her hair, carrying the faint scent of smoke from the chimney. "Go," she said finally. "Go now before Webb comes back. I'll hold this place." Alone. "I've got Bennett. I've got Ruth." Clara almost smiled. "And I've got a shotgun that says I ain't moving." Elijah studied her face. "You're something else, Clara Jennings." "I'm just a woman who's tired of watching children die." He nodded slowly. "I'll be back. I swear it." "I know you will." Elijah turned toward the stable. Then he stopped. "Clara." "Yes." "When this is over." He paused, searching for words. "I'd like to come back. Not just for the children. For you." Clara felt something shift in her chest. Something she hadn't felt in a very long time. "Ride safe, Elijah Coulter." He tipped his hat. "Yes, ma'am." She watched him saddle his horse and ride north until he disappeared over the ridge. Then she turned and walked back inside. The children were waking now, small voices filling the room with questions and fears. Bennett was trying to calm them, but he looked overwhelmed. Ruth was still beside Maggie, refusing to leave. And Tommy. Tommy stood at the window where Elijah had been watching the empty horizon. "Is the man coming back?" he asked. Clara knelt beside him. "Mr. Coulter." "Yes, sweetheart. He's coming back." "The bad men, too." Clara's jaw tightened. "Probably." Tommy nodded slowly. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out the wooden horse. He held it out to Clara. "My sister made this," he said, "before she went to sleep and didn't wake up." Clara's heart broke. "She said it would protect me." Tommy's voice didn't waver. "Now I want it to protect you." Clara took the wooden horse. It was crudely carved, barely recognizable, but it was the most precious thing she'd ever held. "Thank you, Tommy." The boy looked up at her with eyes that had seen too much. "You won't let them take us, will you?" Clara pulled him close. "No, I won't let them take you. I promise." Outside, the wind howled. Somewhere to the south, Silas Webb was gathering men. And somewhere to the north, Elijah Coulter rode toward help that might never come. But Clara Jennings stood her ground. Because that's what you did when children needed you. You stood your ground and you fought, and you didn't stop until you couldn't fight anymore. She tucked the wooden horse into her pocket and picked up her shotgun. Let them come. 2 days passed like years. Clara barely slept. She moved between the windows, watching the horizon, waiting for shadows that hadn't yet appeared. Bennett kept watch when she couldn't. His wounded arm wrapped in bandages that Ruth changed twice daily. The children huddled together, speaking in whispers, afraid to make noise. And Maggie hung between life and death. "Her fever's climbing," Ruth said on the second morning. "I've done everything I can, but she needs medicine I don't have." Clara pressed her hand to Maggie's forehead. The girl's skin burned beneath her fingers. "How long?" "A day, maybe 2. Ruth's voice cracked. "I'm sorry, Miss Clara. I tried. You did more than anyone could ask." Clara smoothed the hair from Maggie's face. "She's strong. She'll fight." But even as she said it, Clara wasn't sure she believed it. Tommy sat in the corner watching. He hadn't spoken since giving Clara the wooden horse. His small hands gripped his knees, knuckles white. When Clara looked at him, he looked away. "He blames himself," Ruth said quietly. "For his sister. For all of it. He's 6 years old. None of this is his fault. Try telling him that." Clara crossed the room and knelt beside Tommy. He didn't look up. "Tommy." "Nothing." "Tommy, look at me." Slowly the boy raised his eyes. "What happened to your sister wasn't your fault," Clara said firmly. "What happened to any of you wasn't your fault. The men who did this, they're the ones to blame, not you, never you." Tommy's lip trembled. "I was supposed to protect her." "You're 6 years old, sweetheart. You weren't supposed to protect anyone." "But she was my sister." Clara's heart shattered. She pulled Tommy into her arms, holding him tight. He resisted for a moment, then collapsed against her small shoulders, shaking with silent sobs. "I know," Clara whispered. "I know, baby. I lost someone too. My son. And I blamed myself for a long time. Still do some days." Tommy looked up at her. "Did it stop hurting?" "No, but it got easier to carry." Clara wiped the tears from his cheeks. "And you know what helps." "What?" "Finding people worth carrying it for." Tommy looked at the other children. At Ruth tending to Maggie. At Bennett watching the window. "Like them?" he asked. "Like them. Like you." Clara kissed his forehead. "We're family now, Tommy. All of us. And family takes care of each other." Bennett's voice cut through the moment. "Clara." Something in his tone made her blood run cold. She crossed to the window. Bennett pointed toward the southern ridge. Riders. Not 3 this time. 10. "Lord have mercy," Clara breathed. Silas Webb rode at the front, his black duster flapping in the wind. Behind him came 9 men, armed to the teeth, moving in formation like soldiers. But that wasn't what made Clara's hands shake. Riding beside Webb in a fine wool coat and a hat that probably cost more than Clara's entire station was an older man with silver hair and a gold watch chain glinting at his vest. Judge Amos Blackwood had come himself. "Get the children to the back room," Clara said. "Now." Ruth moved fast, gathering the little ones, pushing them toward safety. Tommy didn't want to leave, but Clara's look left no room for argument. "What's the plan?" Bennett asked. "Same as before. We hold them off." "Against 10 men, Clara, that's suicide, I know." Clara checked her rifle. "You got a better idea." Bennett was quiet. Then he shook his head. "Reckon not." "Then let's make them earn it." The riders stopped 100 yards from the station. Webb dismounted first, then Blackwood. The judge moved with the careful precision of a man who never hurried because he never had to. "Mrs. Jennings," Blackwood's voice carried across the snow, smooth and cultured. "I believe we have a misunderstanding that needs resolving." Clara opened the door and stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. "No misunderstanding, Judge. I know exactly what you are." Blackwood smiled. It was a practiced smile, the kind politicians wore. "And what am I, Mrs. Jennings?" "A child killer." The smile didn't waver. "Strong words. Actionable words, in fact. I could sue you for slander." "Go ahead." I'd love to see you explain to a jury why 20 children were locked in a wagon and left to freeze. A tragic accident. Blackwood spread his hands. The driver panicked in the storm, made terrible decisions. By the time my men found the wagon, it was too late for many of the children. A tragedy, as I said. Your men found the wagon. Clara's voice was ice. After they locked it, after they walked away. Blackwood's smile finally faded. You're making accusations you can't prove, Mrs. Jennings. And even if you could, who would believe you? A lonely widow, living in the middle of nowhere. He gestured at the station. Against a respected judge, a man with connections to the territorial governor. I've got 9 witnesses who say different. You have 9 traumatized children who will say whatever you tell them to say. Blackwood's voice hardened. This is your last chance, Mrs. Jennings. Hand over the children. Walk away. And we can all pretend this unpleasantness never happened. And if I don't... Blackwood glanced at Webb. The big man grinned. Then Mr. Webb and his associates will have to resolve this matter in a less civilized fashion. Clara raised her rifle. Let them try. Blackwood sighed. I was hoping to avoid this. You seem like a reasonable woman. I am reasonable. That's why I won't let you take these children. You can't stop us. Maybe not, but I can make you bleed. Something shifted in Blackwood's eyes. Something that wasn't amusement anymore. Kill her, he said quietly. Kill them all. Webb drew his gun. Clara fired first. The shot took Webb in the shoulder, spinning him around. The men behind him scattered, diving for cover, returning fire. Bullets slammed into the walls of the station, splintering wood. Clara dropped back inside, slamming the door. Bennett! The deputy was already at the window firing. One of the riders went down. There's too many, he shouted. They're circling. Clara ran to the back window. 3 men were approaching from the north, using a gully for cover. She fired twice, forcing them back. Ruth. We're okay. Ruth's voice came from the back room, high and scared. The children are down. Another volley of shots. Glass shattered. Someone screamed. Clara spun around. Bennett was on the ground, clutching his leg. I'm hit! She dragged him behind the overturned table, propping him against the wall. Blood poured from his thigh. Pressure, Clara said, pressing his hands against the wound. Keep pressure on it. Clara, listen to me. Don't you dare say goodbye. Listen. Bennett grabbed her arm. There's a root cellar under the kitchen. Hidden door under the flour barrel. Get the children in there. What about you? I'll hold them off as long as I can. You'll die. Bennett smiled, blood on his teeth. Then I'll die doing something that matters. Clara stared at him. This young man, barely 25, who'd ridden out here to check on a wagon accident and ended up fighting for his life against the men he'd sworn to serve. You're a good man, Deputy Bennett. My name's Thomas. He laughed, a wet sound. Funny thing to say now, but I figured you should know. Thomas. Clara squeezed his hand. I'll remember. She ran to the back room. The children were huddled on the floor, Ruth standing over them like a guardian angel. Maggie lay on her cot, eyes closed, fever burning. There's a cellar under the kitchen, Clara said. We need to move, now. Ruth hesitated. What about Maggie? We can't move her. We have to. If they get in here... A crash. The front door burst open. Webb stood in the doorway, blood streaming from his shoulder gun raised. His face was twisted with rage. End of the line, Mrs. Jennings. Clara stepped in front of the children. You want them. You go through me. Gladly. He raised his gun. A shot rang out. Webb jerked, eyes going wide. He looked down at the hole in his chest, then back up at Clara. Behind him, Tommy stood holding Bennett's pistol. The gun was almost too big for his small hands, but his aim had been true. Webb fell. Tommy dropped the gun, shaking. I'm sorry. I didn't want to. Clara caught him as he collapsed, pulling him close. You saved us. Tommy, you saved us. But there was no time for comfort. More men were coming. The cellar, Clara shouted. Everyone now. They moved. Ruth carried one of the younger children. Clara grabbed Maggie, ignoring the way the girl moaned in pain. Tommy stumbled along, still shaking. The kitchen floor was rough stone. Clara found the flour barrel, shoved it aside, revealing a wooden trap door. She yanked it open. Down, all of you. The children climbed down into the darkness. Ruth went last, helping lower Maggie carefully. What about you? Ruth asked. Clara looked toward the front of the house. She could hear voices. Footsteps. Someone has to close the door behind you. No. Miss Clara, no. Take care of them, Ruth. Take care of Maggie. Clara's voice broke. Tell Tommy he's the bravest boy I've ever known. She closed the trap door. The flour barrel went back in place. Clara picked up her rifle and turned to face the door. Blackwood walked in. He moved slowly, carefully, stepping over Webb's body without a glance. Behind him came 3 of his men, guns drawn. Impressive, Blackwood said. Truly impressive. 1 woman holding off 10 men. My superiors will be fascinated to hear about this. Your superiors? Clara kept her rifle level. The ones who buy children like livestock. The ones who understand that some lives are worth more than others. Blackwood stopped 10 feet away. Those children in that wagon, orphans, street rats. Nobody wanted them. Nobody cared about them. I was giving them purpose. You were selling them. I was placing them with families who needed workers. Blackwood's voice was cold. Ranches, mines, factories, places where small hands are useful. It's not slavery, Mrs. Jennings. It's economics. Clara's finger tightened on the trigger. It's murder. It's progress. Blackwood smiled. And progress can't be stopped by 1 woman with a rifle. Maybe not, but I can stop you. She fired. The shot went wide. One of Blackwood's men had grabbed her arm, throwing off her aim. The rifle clattered to the floor. Blackwood didn't flinch. As I said, impressive, but ultimately futile. He nodded to his men. Find the children. Kill her. A man stepped forward, raising his gun to Clara's head. Any last words, Mrs. Jennings? Clara looked him in the eye. Go to hell. The gunshot came from outside. The man dropped a hole in his forehead, then another shot. Another man down. Blackwood spun around. What? More shots, hoofbeats, shouting. Through the shattered window, Clara saw riders pouring over the ridge. A dozen of them, maybe more, riding hard toward the station. And at the front, his black coat flying behind him, was Elijah Coulter. Federal marshals, someone shouted. Drop your weapons. Blackwood's face went white. That's impossible. He couldn't have reached Santa Fe in 2 days. He didn't have to, Clara breathed. Elijah had always been 3 steps ahead. The remaining men threw down their guns. They knew a losing fight when they saw one. But Blackwood wasn't finished. He grabbed Clara, pulling her against him, pressing a derringer to her temple. Nobody moves, he screamed. Nobody moves or she dies. The marshals pulled up short. Elijah dismounted, hands raised. Let her go, Blackwood. Marshal Harrison. Blackwood's voice was ragged. I should have known Coulter would run to you. It's over, Judge. We have witnesses. We have evidence. The territorial governor has already been arrested. Lies. We found your ledger, Blackwood. Every transaction. Every child sold. Every politician you bribed. Harrison stepped forward. You're done. Blackwood's hand shook. Clara felt the derringer's barrel press harder against her skull. I am a judge, Blackwood hissed. I am the law. No, Clara said quietly. You're just a man, and men break. She drove her elbow into his ribs. Blackwood gasped, his grip loosening. Clara twisted free, dropping to the floor. Elijah fired. The shot took Blackwood in the hand, sending the derringer spinning away. The judge screamed, clutching his shattered wrist, and collapsed to his knees. Marshals swarmed into the station, grabbing Blackwood, securing the other men. Someone was reading them their rights, but Clara couldn't hear the words. Her ears were ringing. Her hands were shaking. Then Elijah was there, pulling her to her feet, holding her. "Clara, Clara, are you all right?" She couldn't speak. She just held on to him, feeling his heartbeat against her chest, solid and real. "The children," she finally managed. "They're in the cellar. We'll get them. Maggie's hurt. She needs a doctor." "We brought one. Marshal Harrison doesn't travel light." Clara laughed. It came out as a sob. "You came back." "I said I would. I believed you." Clara looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "I actually believed you." Elijah's hand cupped her cheek. "Then you're smarter than most." They found the children in the cellar, huddled together in the dark. Ruth was crying, holding Maggie's hand. Tommy was sitting apart, staring at nothing. Clara climbed down into the darkness and opened her arms. They came to her, all of them, even Ruth, even Tommy. Small bodies pressing close, seeking warmth, seeking safety. "It's over," Clara whispered. "It's over. You're safe now." Tommy looked up at her. The bad men. Gone. Forever. "Promise." Clara kissed his forehead. "I promise." The doctor worked on Maggie for 3 hours. Clara sat outside the room, Elijah beside her, waiting. The other children had been fed, bathed, put to bed in clean blankets brought by the marshals. Bennett Thomas was being treated for his wounds. He would live. Ruth sat with Clara, refusing to leave until she knew about Maggie. "She's strong," Ruth said quietly. "Strongest of all of us." "She is." "She talked about you, before the fever got bad." Ruth looked at Clara. "She said you reminded her of her mother, the way you held her, the way you said her name." Clara's throat tightened. "What happened to her mother?" "Died in the orphanage. Fever same as this." Ruth paused. "Maggie was with her at the end. She was 4 years old." Clara closed her eyes. The door opened. The doctor emerged, wiping his hands on a cloth. "She'll live." Ruth burst into tears. Clara grabbed the doctor's arm. "You're sure?" "The fever's breaking. The wound is clean. She'll need weeks of rest, but she'll recover." The doctor smiled tiredly. "She asked for you. Said she wanted to see the lady with the sad eyes." Clara stood slowly. Her legs felt weak. Elijah caught her arm. "You want me to come?" "No. This is something I need to do alone." She walked into the room. Maggie lay on a clean bed, propped up on pillows, her face pale but peaceful. When she saw Clara, she smiled. "You came back." "I never left, sweetheart." Clara sat on the edge of the bed. "I was right outside." "I know. I could hear you." Maggie's small hand found Clara's. "You were crying." "I was worried." "Don't cry anymore." Maggie squeezed her fingers. "I'm okay now." Clara brushed the hair from Maggie's forehead. "Yes, you are." "Miss Clara." "Yes." "Are you going to send us away to another orphanage?" Clara's heart stopped. She looked at this child, this brave, beautiful child who had survived horrors no one should ever face. "No," Clara said. "I'm not sending you anywhere." "Promise." Clara leaned down and kissed Maggie's forehead. "I promise." Maggie smiled, her eyes already closing. "Okay, I believe you." Within minutes, she was asleep. Clara sat there for a long time, holding her hand, watching her breathe. The door opened softly. Elijah stepped inside. "Clara, I'm keeping them." "What?" "All of them. Every single one." Clara didn't look up. "I know it's crazy. I know I can't afford it. I know 100 reasons why it won't work, but I'm keeping them." Elijah was quiet for a moment. Then he crossed the room and knelt beside her. "You'll need help." "I'll manage." "You'll need someone to fix the station, build more rooms, hunt chop-wood handle horses." Clara finally looked at him. "You applying for a job, Mr. Coulter?" "Depends." Elijah's eyes met hers. "You hiring?" Something shifted between them. Something that had been building since the first night since he'd stumbled through her door with a dying child in his arms. "It won't be easy," Clara said. "Nothing worth doing ever is. And you'd give up your freedom, settle down with a widow and 9 children." Elijah reached out and took her hand. "Mrs. Jennings, I've been wandering for 3 years, looking for something I couldn't name, something I lost at that farmhouse in Texas." He squeezed her fingers. "I think I found it here." Clara felt tears building again. She was tired of crying. "This isn't a fairy tale, Elijah. There's no happy ending waiting around the corner." "Maybe not, but there's a chance, and chances are more than I deserve." He stood still, holding her hand. "Let me stay, Clara. Let me help. Let me be part of whatever you're building here." Clara looked at Maggie sleeping peacefully. At the door where Ruth was peeking in, trying not to be seen. At the window where dawn was breaking over the snow-covered hills. "All right," she said softly. "Stay." Elijah smiled. It was the first real smile she'd seen from him. "Yes, ma'am." The trial began 3 weeks later in Santa Fe. Clara sat in the front row of the courtroom, her hands folded in her lap, watching Judge Amos Blackwood stand before the federal judge. The man who had ordered children locked in a wagon to die now stood in chains. His silver hair uncombed, his fine clothes replaced by prison gray. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. But Clara didn't feel satisfaction. Not yet. Elijah sat beside her, his shoulder pressed against hers. Behind them, Marshal Harrison and his men filled the gallery. The territorial governor had already been sentenced, his political career destroyed. Now it was Blackwood's turn. "Amos Blackwood," the federal judge said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You have been found guilty of child trafficking conspiracy to commit murder and corruption of public officials. Do you have anything to say before I pass sentence?" Blackwood lifted his head. His eyes found Clara's across the room. "I did what I did for the good of this territory," he said. "Those children were unwanted, burdens on society. I gave them purpose." "You gave them death," the judge replied coldly. "I gave them opportunity. The weak perished as the weak always do. The strong survived." Blackwood's voice rose. "That is the law of nature. That is the law of progress." "This is not nature, sir. This is a court of law." The judge leaned forward. "And the law says you are guilty." He pronounced the sentence, death by hanging, to be carried out within 30 days. The gallery erupted. Marshals grabbed Blackwood as he struggled. Clara watched him being dragged away, screaming curses promising vengeance. Then he was gone. Elijah's hand found hers. "It's over." "No," Clara said quietly. "It's just beginning." The children were waiting at the hotel when Clara and Elijah returned. Ruth had organized them, keeping the little ones quiet, making sure everyone was fed. She'd become Clara's right hand in the weeks since the rescue, taking on responsibilities no 12-year-old should have to bear. "What happened?" Ruth asked the moment Clara walked through the door. "He's going to hang." Ruth closed her eyes. Relief washed over her face, but something else too. Something darker. "Good," she whispered. "I hope it hurts." Clara knelt beside her. "Ruth." "I know. I shouldn't say that." Ruth's hands clenched. "But I watched children die in that wagon, Miss Clara. I held Lily Warren's hand while she stopped breathing. She was 5 years old." "I know, sweetheart. So forgive me if I can't feel sorry for him." Clara pulled Ruth into her arms. "I don't expect you to feel sorry for him. I just don't want you to carry hate in your heart. It'll poison you." "How do you not hate him?" Clara thought about it. about James, about the years she'd spent angry at God, at the world, at herself. "I don't know if I don't hate him," she admitted. "But I know that hating him won't bring back the children we lost, and it won't help the children we saved." Ruth was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "I'll try. That's all anyone can do." Tommy appeared in the doorway. He'd been watching, listening, his dark eyes taking in everything. "Miss Clara." "Yes, sweetheart." "Is the bad man going away forever?" Clara released Ruth and turned to face him. "Yes, Tommy. Forever." Tommy's face didn't change. He'd been like this since the shooting closed off Unreachable. The doctor said it was shock, that he needed time. But time was passing, and Tommy wasn't getting better. "Can I see Maggie now?" he asked. "Of course. She's been asking for you." Tommy walked past without another word. Clara watched him go, her heart aching. "He's getting worse," Elijah said quietly. "I know." "Have you thought about what the doctor suggested?" Clara shook her head. The doctor had recommended sending Tommy to a special hospital in Boston, a place for children with nervous conditions. Clara had refused. "He's not going to any hospital. He's staying with us. Clara, if he needs help we can't give him, then we'll find another way." Clara's voice was firm. "I promised him he'd never be sent away again. I meant it." Elijah didn't argue. He'd learned in the weeks they'd spent together that arguing with Clara Jennings was like arguing with a stone wall. "All right," he said. "We'll find another way." Maggie was sitting up when Tommy entered her room. Her color had returned, and her eyes were bright again. The fever had broken completely, leaving behind a girl who was stronger than anyone expected. "Tommy." She patted the bed beside her. "Come sit." Tommy climbed up carefully, avoiding her bandaged side. He didn't speak. "I heard about the trial," Maggie said. "Ruth told me. The judge is going to hang." Tommy nodded. "Are you okay?" Another nod. Maggie studied his face. "You're not okay." Tommy's lip trembled, just slightly. "I killed a man," he whispered. Maggie's eyes widened. "What? The big one. Webb. I shot him." Tommy's voice cracked. "I took Deputy Bennett's gun and I shot him and he died." Maggie was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and took Tommy's hand. "Did he deserve it?" "What? Did he deserve to die? Was he going to hurt Miss Clara?" Tommy nodded slowly. "He was going to shoot her. Then you saved her life." "But I killed someone, Maggie. I'm a murderer." "No." Maggie's voice was fierce. "A murderer is someone who kills for no reason. You killed to protect someone you love. That's different." "Is it?" "My mama told me once that there are two kinds of killing. The kind that takes life, and the kind that saves it." Maggie squeezed his hand. "You saved Miss Clara. You saved all of us. That's not murder, Tommy. That's being a hero." Tommy's eyes filled with tears. "I don't feel like a hero." "Heroes never do." He broke then. The walls he'd built, the silence he'd wrapped around himself, all of it crumbled. He collapsed against Maggie, sobbing, and she held him as best she could with her wounded side. "It's okay," she whispered. "It's okay, Tommy. I've got you." In the doorway, Clara stood watching. Tears streamed down her face. Sometimes healing came from the most unexpected places. The next morning brought trouble. A woman arrived at the hotel, dressed in severe black, carrying a leather satchel. She introduced herself as Mrs. Agatha Whitmore, representative of the New Mexico Territorial Orphan Welfare Society. "I'm here about the children," she said, her voice clipped and efficient. "The ones recovered from the Blackwood case." Clara's blood ran cold. "What about them?" "They need to be processed, evaluated, placed with appropriate families." "They're already with an appropriate family. Me." Mrs. Whitmore's eyebrows rose. You, a single woman running a relay station in the middle of nowhere. I'm not single. The words came out before Clara could stop them. She felt Elijah stiffen beside her. Oh. Mrs. Whitmore looked between them. And you are Elijah Coulter. He stepped forward. Her fiancé. Clara's heart skipped. They hadn't discussed this, hadn't even talked about what they were to each other beyond two people who'd survived something terrible together. But Elijah's hand found hers, and she didn't pull away. Mrs. Whitmore pursed her lips. Be that as it may, there are procedures to follow. These children are wards of the territory. They cannot simply be claimed by whoever happens to find them. I didn't find them, Clara said. I saved them. There's a difference. The law doesn't recognize that difference, Mrs. Jennings. Then the law is wrong. Mrs. Whitmore sighed. I understand your attachment to these children. Truly I do. But you must understand my position. I have a responsibility to ensure they are placed in stable, secure homes. My home is stable. Your home was recently the site of a gunfight that left 3 men dead. Because those men were trying to kidnap the children. Exactly my point. Mrs. Whitmore opened her satchel and pulled out a stack of documents. These children have been through enough trauma. They need peace, safety, not a woman who attracts violence. Clara's hands shook. You can't take them. I'm not taking anyone today, Mrs. Jennings. I'm simply informing you of the process. Mrs. Whitmore set the documents on the table. There will be a custody hearing in 2 weeks. You'll have the opportunity to present your case. If the judge decides you're suitable, you may keep the children. If not... She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Clara stared at the documents. Her whole world reduced to paperwork and procedures. Get out, she said quietly. Mrs. Jennings, get out of my hotel, now. Mrs. Whitmore gathered her satchel with dignity. I'll see you in 2 weeks, Mrs. Jennings. I suggest you prepare carefully. She left. Clara sank into a chair, her legs giving out. Elijah knelt beside her. Clara, look at me. She couldn't. Her eyes were fixed on the documents. They're going to take them, she whispered. After everything, they're going to take them anyway. No. Elijah's voice was firm. No one is taking anyone. You heard her. A custody hearing, procedures, paperwork. Clara laughed bitterly. I can't win a legal battle, Elijah. I'm nobody. A widow running a station in the desert. You're the woman who stood against 10 armed men to protect 9 children. You're the woman who carried dying kids through a blizzard. You're the woman Blackwood himself couldn't break. Elijah cupped her face in his hands. You're not nobody, Clara Jennings, and we are not giving up. Clara met his eyes. In them she saw the same fire that had driven him to ride 2 days through winter to bring help. The same determination that had made him stay when walking away would have been easier. What do we do? She asked. We fight, same as always. Elijah stood pulling her up with him. But this time we fight with lawyers instead of guns. We can't afford lawyers. Marshall Harrison knows people. Good people. People who hate what Blackwood represented. Elijah's jaw set. We'll find a way. Ruth appeared in the doorway. Her face was pale. Miss Clara! The children heard everything. Clara's heart sank. How much? Enough. Maggie's crying. Tommy won't speak again. The little ones are asking if they're going back to the orphanage. Clara closed her eyes. Then she opened them and straightened her spine. Take me to them. The children were huddled in Maggie's room, crammed together on the bed like survivors of a shipwreck. 8 faces looked up as Clara entered 8 pairs of eyes filled with fear. Are they sending us away? Maggie's voice was small. Like Judge Blackwood was going to... Clara crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed. She looked at each child in turn. Maggie brave and stubborn. Ruth wise beyond her years. Tommy still lost in the darkness of what he'd done. The others whose names she was still learning: Sarah Joseph, Emma William, Little Mary. "Listen to me," Clara said. "All of you listen carefully." They watched her, waiting. "There are people who want to take you away from me, put you in another orphanage or with other families. People who think they know what's best for you." Maggie's hand found Clara's. "We don't want to go." "I know, sweetheart, and I don't want you to go either." Clara's voice strengthened. "So here's what's going to happen. We're going to fight. We're going to stand up in front of a judge and we're going to tell him that we're a family, that we belong together, that nothing and no one is going to tear us apart." "Will it work?" Ruth asked. "I don't know." Clara met her eyes honestly. "But I know that I will do everything in my power to keep you, all of you. And I know that Mr. Coulter will be right there beside me." Tommy looked up. "Even me?" Clara's heart broke at the question. "Especially you, Tommy. You're as much my family as anyone in this room." "But I—" He trailed off, unable to say the words again. Clara pulled him onto her lap. "You saved my life. You saved all of us. And no matter what happens, you are my son now. Do you understand?" Tommy stared at her. "Your son, if you'll have me." The boy's arms wrapped around her neck. He held on like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept trying to wash him away. "I'll have you," he whispered. Clara held him tight. Then it settled. The next 2 weeks were chaos. Marshal Harrison proved as good as Elijah's word. He brought a lawyer from Santa Fe, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine Price, who had made her name defending settlers against railroad companies. "Child custody cases aren't my specialty," she admitted. "But the principles are the same. We need to prove that you're the best option for these children. Better than any orphanage, better than any strangers." "How do we do that?" Clara asked. "Character witnesses, community support, evidence of stability." Catherine reviewed her notes. "The fact that you saved these children from certain death helps enormously. So does Mr. Coulter's background as a Texas Ranger." "Former Ranger," Elijah corrected. "Even better. A man who served the law chose to walk away when he saw corruption and then returned to service when innocence needed him. That's the kind of story judges love." Clara looked at Elijah. He hadn't told her about corruption being the reason he left. His eyes met hers. Later, they seemed to say. She nodded. "What about the shooting?" Clara asked. "Mrs. Whitmore mentioned the gunfight. 3 men died in my station." "Self-defense, well documented. Marshal Harrison's men will testify to what they found when they arrived." Catherine smiled grimly. "If anything, it proves you're willing to die to protect these children. What better proof of fitness could there be?" The day before the hearing, a visitor arrived at the station. Clara was in the kitchen preparing breakfast for the children when Elijah's voice called from the front room. "Clara, you need to see this." She wiped her hands and walked out. A man stood in her doorway. Middle-aged, weathered face wearing the clothes of a working rancher. His hat was in his hands, and his eyes were fixed on the floor. "Ma'am," he said. "My name's Robert Sullivan." Clara froze. Sullivan. Maggie's name was Sullivan. "You're Maggie's father?" she asked. The man flinched. "No, ma'am. Her uncle. Her father, my brother, died 8 years ago. Her mother passed in the orphanage 3 years after that." "Then why are you here?" Robert Sullivan finally looked up. His eyes were wet. "I came to take her home." Clara's heart stopped. "You can't," she said. "You can't just appear and claim her. Where were you when she was locked in that wagon? Where were you when she almost died?" "I didn't know." Sullivan's voice cracked. "I swear to God, ma'am, I didn't know. When my brother died, I was in California. Took me years to make my way back. By the time I reached St. Louis, the orphanage said she'd been placed with a family in the West." He shook his head. "I spent 2 years looking for her. 2 years. And now, you just happened to find her." The trial was in all the papers. Blackwood's name, the children, everything. Sullivan pulled a newspaper from his coat. The headline read, "Justice for the Orphan Train Children." Soon as I saw the name Sullivan, I came as fast as I could. Clara's legs felt weak. She's my daughter now. She's my niece, my blood. Sullivan stepped forward. I ain't here to fight you, ma'am. I can see you love her. Anyone could see that. But she's got family. Real family. And I'm here to take her home. This is her home. Ma'am? Get out. Sullivan's face fell. Please, just let me talk to her. Let me explain. She's been through enough. She doesn't need some stranger walking in and turning her life upside down again. I'm not a stranger. I'm her uncle. Clara's hands shook. You're a man she's never met coming to take her away from the only mother she's known in 3 years. That makes you a stranger. Ruth appeared in the doorway. Miss Clara, Maggie's asking what's happening. She heard shouting. Clara closed her eyes. Opened them. Bring her here, she said quietly. She has a right to know. Maggie walked into the room slowly, her wounded side still making her move carefully. When she saw Robert Sullivan, she stopped. Who are you? Sullivan's eyes filled with tears. Maggie, my God, you look just like your mother. Maggie frowned. You knew my mother. I'm Robert Sullivan, your father's brother. He took a hesitant step forward. Your uncle. Maggie's face went white. She looked at Clara. Is it true? Clara's throat tightened. I don't know, sweetheart. We'd have to verify. I have proof. Sullivan pulled out a faded photograph. This is your father, my brother Daniel, on our family farm in Missouri. And this, he pulled out another photo, is your parents on their wedding day. Look at your mother's face. Tell me you don't see yourself. Maggie took the photos with trembling hands. She stared at them for a long moment. Mama, she whispered. Clara's heart shattered. I came to bring you home, Maggie, Sullivan said gently. To Missouri, where your father grew up, where you should have grown up. Maggie looked at Clara. Her eyes were filled with confusion, with pain, with a desperate question she didn't know how to ask. Miss Clara. Clara wanted to fight, wanted to scream that Maggie belonged with her, that no blood relative could love this child more than she already did. But she looked at Maggie's face, at the photos clutched in her small hands, at the first connection to her real parents she'd had in years. It's your choice, sweetheart, Clara said. Her voice didn't shake. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. But I don't want to choose. Maggie's voice broke. I don't want to lose you. Clara knelt down and took Maggie's hands. You will never lose me. Never. No matter where you go, no matter how far I am, always your mother. Do you understand? Maggie nodded, tears streaming down her face. But this man might be your family too, and family matters. Clara looked at Sullivan, then back at Maggie. Take time. Think about what you want. Nobody is making any decisions today. Sullivan cleared his throat. The custody hearing is tomorrow. I know. If the court decides to place her with me, then we'll deal with that when it happens. Clara stood. For now you can stay at the hotel in town. Get to know your niece properly. No pressure, no demands. Sullivan looked like he wanted to argue. Then he looked at Maggie's face, and something in him softened. All right, he said. All right. I can do that. He left. Maggie collapsed into Clara's arms. I don't want to go, she sobbed. I don't want to leave you. Clara held her tight. I know, baby. I know. But even as she said the words, Clara felt something cold settling in her chest. Tomorrow was the hearing, and she might lose everything. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat on the porch of the hotel wrapped in a blanket watching the stars. The children were all in bed, even Ruth, who usually stayed up late worrying. The silence was complete. Elijah found her there. Thought you might need company, he said, settling beside her. I might lose her tomorrow. You might. Is that supposed to make me feel better? No. Elijah's shoulder pressed against hers. But lying to you won't help either. Clara was quiet for a moment. When you left the Rangers, you said it was because you got somewhere too late. But Catherine mentioned corruption. Elijah stiffened. Which was it? Clara asked. The truth. He was silent for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Both. The family I failed to save, they were witnesses, set to testify against a railroad company that was stealing land from settlers. My captain was on the company's payroll. He delayed me on purpose. Clara's breath caught. By the time I figured it out, it was too late. The family was dead, and my captain got a promotion. Elijah's jaw tightened. I could have gone to the authorities, could have fought. Instead, I quit, walked away. Why? Because I was a coward. The word came out harsh, bitter. Because fighting meant risking my life, my reputation, everything, and I wasn't brave enough to do it. Clara turned to look at him. You rode 2 days through a blizzard to save children you'd never met. That was different. How? Because by then I had nothing left to lose. Elijah met her eyes. You gave me something to fight for again, Clara. You and those children. For the first time in 3 years, I care about tomorrow. Clara reached out and took his hand. Then let's make sure tomorrow is worth caring about. The hearing arrived too quickly. Clara sat at a long table in the courtroom, Elijah on one side, Catherine Price on the other. Across the aisle, Mrs. Whitmore sat with her files and her severe expression. Robert Sullivan sat behind her looking uncomfortable. The children had been brought in as witnesses. They sat in a row behind Clara Ruth, holding the hands of the younger ones, Maggie pale and trembling. The judge, an older man named Harrison, not related to the marshal, called the proceedings to order. We are here to determine the custody of 9 minor children currently in the care of Mrs. Clara Jennings. He looked over his spectacles. Mrs. Whitmore, you may present your case. Mrs. Whitmore stood. Your Honor, these children have been through unspeakable trauma. They need stability, structure, proper education. Mrs. Jennings, while clearly well-intentioned, is a single woman living in an isolated relay station with no formal education and limited resources. I'm not single, Clara interrupted. Mr. Coulter and I are to be married. Mrs. Whitmore's eyebrows rose. Is that so? When was this decided? Does it matter? It matters if it was decided solely to influence this hearing. Catherine stood. Your Honor, Mrs. Jennings and Mr. Coulter's relationship is genuine and documented. Marshal Harrison can testify to their conduct during the rescue operation. The judge nodded. Proceed, Mrs. Whitmore. Even with a husband. Your Honor, the question remains, is a remote relay station the appropriate place to raise 9 children? These children deserve schools, churches, communities, not a life of isolation. Catherine rose again. Your Honor, may I present my first witness, Miss Ruth Carver, age 12. Ruth walked to the witness stand, her chin high. Ruth, Catherine said gently, can you tell the court about your experience with Mrs. Jennings? Ruth took a breath. Miss Clara saved my life. She saved all our lives. When those men came to take us back to Judge Blackwood, she stood in front of us with a rifle and told them they'd have to go through her first. And how has she treated you since? Like family. Ruth's voice strengthened. She feeds us. She teaches us. She holds us when we have nightmares. She calls us by our names. Her eyes glistened. In the orphanage we were numbers. Here we're people. The judge leaned forward. And what about Education Church? Miss Clara teaches us to read every morning, and she reads us the Bible every night. Ruth looked at the judge steadily. She may not have a schoolhouse, Your Honor, but she's the best teacher I've ever had. Mrs. Whitmore stood. Mrs. Whitmore. Your Honor. This is very touching, but children cannot objectively evaluate their own best interests. That's why the law exists. The law also exists to protect children from people who lock them in wagons to die, Catherine snapped, which Mrs. Whitmore's organization failed to do despite being responsible for their placement. The courtroom went silent. Mrs. Whitmore's face reddened. That is not. Judge Blackwood was on the board of 3 Eastern orphanages that partnered with your organization. Catherine pulled out a document. His signature appears on the transfer orders for these very children, orders that Mrs. Whitmore's office approved. The judge's expression darkened. Is this true? Mrs. Whitmore swallowed. Your Honor, we had no way of knowing. You had every way of knowing, Clara said, rising from her chair. You just didn't care. These children were nobody to you. Paperwork, numbers. You signed their lives away and never thought twice about it. Mrs. Jennings. My name is Clara. Clara's voice rang through the courtroom. And those children behind me, they have names too. Ruth, Maggie, Tommy, Sarah, Joseph, Emma, William, Mary. They're not numbers. They're not paperwork. They're human beings who deserve better than what this territory gave them. The judge held up his hand. Mrs. Jennings, sit down. Clara sat. Her heart was pounding. The judge was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to Robert Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan, you've claimed kinship to one of these children, Maggie Sullivan. Sullivan stood. Yes, Your Honor. She's my brother's daughter. Do you have documentation? Birth records, marriage records, family photographs? Sullivan handed over a folder. It's all there. The judge reviewed the documents, his face unreadable. These appear to be in order. He looked at Maggie. Young lady, please approach the bench. Maggie walked forward slowly. Clara's heart was in her throat. Maggie Sullivan, the judge said gently. This man claims to be your uncle. Do you wish to go with him? Maggie looked at Sullivan, then at Clara. I don't know him, she said quietly. He is your blood family. Miss Clara is my family too. Maggie's voice strengthened. She held me when I was dying. She stayed by my bed for 3 days when the fever was worst. She told me stories about her son James, so I wouldn't be scared of the dark. The judge's expression softened. Those are the actions of a loving mother. She is my mother. Maggie's chin lifted. I don't care about blood. I don't care about papers. Miss Clara is my mother, and I want to stay with her. Sullivan's face crumpled. Maggie, please. I came all this way. I'm sorry. Maggie's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry you lost your brother. I'm sorry you spent 2 years looking for me. But I finally found a home. I finally found someone who loves me. I can't give that up. The courtroom was silent. The judge looked at Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan, in light of the child's stated preference. Wait. Sullivan held up his hand. His voice was thick. Just wait. He walked toward Maggie slowly, knelt down in front of her. You look so much like your mother, he said. She was the bravest woman I ever knew. Until now. Maggie's lip trembled. I'm not going to fight this, Sullivan said. I came here to give you a home, but you already have one. He looked at Clara. A better one than I could offer. Clara's eyes filled with tears. But I have one request, Sullivan continued. Let me visit. Let me be part of your life, even from far away. Let me send letters, birthday gifts. Let me be your uncle, even if I can't be your guardian. Maggie looked at Clara. Clara nodded. Okay, Maggie whispered. You can be my uncle. Sullivan smiled through his tears. That's enough. That's more than enough. He stood and turned to the judge. I withdraw my claim, Your Honor. Maggie belongs with Mrs. Jennings. The judge nodded slowly. Very well. And the other children? Catherine stood. Your Honor, given the testimony presented today and the clear failure of the territorial system to protect these children, we request that full custody be granted to Clara Jennings and her intended husband, Elijah Coulter. The judge looked at Mrs. Whitmore. Do you have any further objections? Mrs. Whitmore's face was pale. She looked at the children, at Clara, at the documents in Catherine's hands. No, Your Honor, she said quietly. No further objections. The judge struck his gavel. Custody is granted. These children are hereby placed in the permanent care of Clara Jennings and Elijah Coulter. He looked at Clara. Raise them well, Mrs. Jennings. Clara couldn't speak. She could only nod. Behind her, the children erupted in cheers. Ruth was crying. Maggie ran to Clara's arms. Tommy stood apart watching, but there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Hope. Elijah's hand found Clara's. We did it, he said. Clara looked at the children. Her children now. No, she said. We're just getting started. The execution of Judge Amos Blackwood took place on a cold morning in February. Clara didn't attend, neither did Elijah. They stayed at the relay station with the children going about their morning chores as if it were any other day. But it wasn't any other day. At precisely 8 o'clock, church bells rang in Socorro, 30 miles away. Clara paused in the kitchen, her hands still in the bread dough. Elijah stopped chopping wood outside. The children went quiet. For one long moment, everything was still. Then Maggie's voice broke the silence. Is it done? Clara wiped her hands on her apron. It's done. Good. Maggie turned back to her reading lesson, her small finger tracing the words on the page. Can we have apple butter on the bread today? Clara almost laughed. Almost. Yes, sweetheart. We can have apple butter. Life, it seemed, went on. The wedding happened 3 weeks later. It wasn't fancy. No cathedral, no silk dress, no 100 guests. Just a small ceremony in the front room of the relay station, with Marshal Harrison officiating and 9 children serving as witnesses. Clara wore her Sunday best, a blue dress she'd made herself from fabric Elijah had bought in Santa Fe. Elijah wore a new shirt, crisp and white, with his Texas Ranger badge pinned to his chest. You sure about this? He'd asked that morning, standing awkwardly in the doorway while Ruth helped Clara with her hair. I've never been more sure of anything. It's not too late to change your mind. I'm not exactly a prize. Worn down too many miles, too many regrets. Clara had crossed the room and taken his face in her hands. Elijah Coulter, I have spent 2 years alone, grieving a son I couldn't save, and a life I thought was over. Then you walked through my door with a dying child in your arms, and everything changed. Clara, hush. I'm not finished. She'd looked into his gray eyes, seeing all the pain and hope and fear that lived there. I don't need a prize. I don't need perfect. I need someone who'll stand beside me when the world tries to knock me down. Someone who'll love these children like they're his own. Someone who'll still be here tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. Elijah's hands had covered hers. I'll be here. I swear it. Then that's enough. That's more than enough. Now standing before Marshal Harrison, their hands clasped together, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Do you, Clara Jennings, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do. And do you, Elijah Coulter, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of New Mexico, I pronounce you husband and wife. Harrison smiled. You may kiss the bride. Elijah cupped Clara's face in his work-roughened hands and kissed her gently. Behind them, the children erupted in cheers. Ew! William shouted, covering his eyes. Hush, William, Ruth scolded. It's romantic. It's gross. Maggie threw her arms around both Clara and Elijah. Does this mean I can call you Pa now? Elijah's eyes went bright. He knelt down, bringing himself to Maggie's level. You can call me whatever you want, little one. Pa. Maggie said, testing the word. I like it. Tommy hung back watching. He'd gotten better in the weeks since the trial, talking more, sleeping without nightmares. But there were still shadows in his eyes, moments when he drifted away to somewhere no one could follow. Clara crossed to him. Tommy, you all right? Tommy looked up at her. Are you really married now? Really married. And Mr. Coulter is staying forever. Forever. Tommy was quiet for a moment. Then slowly he reached into his pocket and pulled out the wooden horse, the one his sister had carved, the one he'd given Clara for protection. I want it back now, he said. Clara's heart clenched. Of course, sweetheart. Not because I don't want you to have it. Tommy took the horse and held it tight. Because I don't think you need protection anymore. Clara knelt down and pulled him into her arms. You're right. I don't need protection anymore. Because I have you. Tommy hugged her back. For the first time since Clara had known him, he didn't let go first. Spring came slowly to the territory. The snow melted in patches, revealing brown grass and rocky soil. The creek behind the station began to run again, carrying ice water down from the mountains. And the relay station, once a lonely outpost in the desert, became something else entirely. A home. Elijah built new rooms, expanding the small building into something that could hold a family of 11. Clara planted a garden, teaching the children how to coax vegetables from the stubborn earth. Ruth took over the cooking, surprising everyone with a natural talent she'd hidden during the months of survival. And the children grew. Maggie's wound healed completely, leaving only a small scar on her side. She became Clara's shadow, following her everywhere, asking endless questions about everything from bread making to horse training. Tommy started speaking more. First single words, then sentences, then whole conversations. He still kept the wooden horse in his pocket, but now he showed it to people instead of hiding it. Ruth turned 13 in April. They celebrated with a cake Clara made from scratch and a new dress Elijah bought in Santa Fe. Ruth cried when she opened the box. No one's ever given me a birthday present, she said. Get used to it, Clara replied. You've got a lot of birthdays to make up for. The younger children, Sarah Joseph, Emma William, and Mary, adapted fastest of all. They ran and played and fought and made up the way children were supposed to. Sometimes Clara would stand at the window and watch them, marveling at their resilience. They'd been locked in a wagon to die. They'd lost friends, siblings, everything they knew. And still they laughed. One evening in late April, Deputy Thomas Bennett rode up to the station. His arm had healed, though he still walked with a slight limp from the leg wound. He'd been promoted to sheriff after Monroe's arrest, the youngest in the territory's history. Sheriff Bennett, Clara said, meeting him on the porch. What brings you out here? News. Bennett dismounted and removed his hat. Figured you'd want to hear it in person. Clara's stomach tightened. Good news or bad? Depends on how you look at it. Bennett reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a leather pouch. The territorial government finished going through Blackwood's estate. Turns out he had a lot of money. Most of it's going to victims' compensation, but there's a portion set aside specifically for the surviving children. He handed Clara the pouch. She opened it. Inside were legal documents and a bank draft. When she saw the amount, she nearly dropped it. $10,000. Her voice came out as a whisper. That can't be right. It's right. 1,000 for each surviving child, plus an additional 1,000 for you and Mr. Coulter. Recognition for what you did. Clara's hands shook. I didn't do it for money. I know. That's why you deserve it. Elijah appeared in the doorway. What's going on? Clara handed him the bank draft. His eyes went wide. Good Lord. It's enough to build a proper house, Bennett said. A school, maybe. Whatever you need. Clara looked at Elijah, at the children gathering behind him, curious about the visitor. We'll need to think about it, she said. Take all the time you need. Bennett mounted his horse. Oh, one more thing. Marshal Harrison wanted me to tell you there's been interest from back east. Newspapers. They want to write about what happened here. About you. About me. The woman who stood against corruption and won. The woman who saved 9 children from certain death. Bennett smiled. You're famous, Mrs. Coulter. Clara shook her head. I'm not famous. I'm just a mother. Sometimes that's the same thing. He tipped his hat and rode away. The newspaper reporters came a week later. Clara didn't want to talk to them. She'd never liked attention, never wanted to be noticed. But Elijah convinced her. These children's story needs to be told, he said. The world needs to know what happened here, what Blackwood did, what you stopped. What we stopped. Fine, what we stopped. Elijah took her hand. But Clara, you're the heart of this. You're the one who refused to look away. You're the one who stood in that doorway and told armed men they'd have to go through you. I was terrified. That's what makes it brave. So Clara talked. She told them about the night Elijah arrived with Maggie, about the ride through the blizzard, about finding the wagon and the children inside, about the siege, the trial, the custody hearing. She didn't cry, not once. She'd done enough crying. But when the reporter asked about James, about her son who'd died 2 years before all this began, her voice finally broke. He was the best thing I ever did, Clara said. And losing him was the worst thing that ever happened to me. For a long time I thought that was the end of my story, that I was just waiting to die. What changed? Clara looked out the window where the children were playing in the spring sunshine. Maggie was teaching Tommy to throw a rope. Ruth was reading to the little ones under a tree. Elijah was repairing the fence, stopping every few minutes to wave at someone or answer a question. I found a reason to live again, Clara said. 9 of them, actually. The article ran in papers across the country. Widow saves 9 orphans from death, the headlines read. Woman stands alone against corrupt judge. Letters poured in. Hundreds of them. From women who'd lost children. From orphans who'd grown up alone. From people who simply wanted to say they were moved by Clara's story. Ruth read them aloud in the evenings, sorting them into piles. Fan letters. Marriage proposals for Elijah, which made everyone laugh. Donations. Requests for advice. And one letter that made Clara's blood run cold. It arrived in early May with no return address. The handwriting was unfamiliar, cramped and angry. Clara almost threw it away without reading it. But something made her open it. The words inside were brief. You killed a good man. You destroyed a good cause. There are others who believe as Blackwood believed. We will not forget what you did. We will not forgive. Watch your back, Mrs. Coulter. Watch your children's backs. Because one day, when you least expect it, justice will find you. There was no signature. Clara's hands shook as she read the letter again. Then again. Clara. Elijah's voice came from the doorway. What's wrong? She handed him the letter. His face went hard as he read it. When he finished, he crumpled the paper in his fist. Coward, he said, sending threats through the mail. What if they mean it? What if someone comes for us? Then they'll find a former Texas Ranger, a woman who's already killed to protect her children, and 9 kids who know how to survive anything. Elijah put his arm around her. We've faced worse than anonymous letters, Clara. Have we? We survived Blackwood. We survived Webb. We survived a blizzard and a siege and a courtroom full of people who wanted to take our children away. Elijah turned her to face him. Some coward with a pen isn't going to break us. Clara wanted to believe him. She wanted to feel the same certainty he did. But that night, she checked the locks twice. And she slept with the shotgun beside the bed. The threat never materialized. Weeks passed, then months. Summer came hot and dry. The children grew tan from the sun, running wild across the desert, learning to ride horses and shoot rifles and rope cattle. Clara watched them constantly waiting for danger that never came. Finally, in August, Elijah sat her down. "You're making yourself sick," he said. "Jumping at shadows, barely sleeping. The children are starting to notice." "I can't help it. Every time I close my eyes, I see that letter." "The letter was a bluff, Clara. Someone trying to scare you because they couldn't do anything else." "How do you know?" "Because if they were real, they would have come by now. Blackwood's been dead for 6 months. His organization is destroyed. Everyone connected to him is either in prison or running scared." Elijah took her hands. "It's over. It's really over." Clara wanted to believe him. She really did. But what if nothing? Elijah's voice was gentle but firm. "You can't live in fear forever. That's not living. That's just waiting to die." Clara's throat tightened. "That's what I was doing before you came. Waiting to die." "I know. And you stopped. You chose to live. You chose to fight." Elijah cupped her face in his hands. "Don't go back there, Clara. Don't let some anonymous coward steal the life you've built." Clara looked into his gray eyes, saw the love there, the certainty. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know. I don't know how to stop being scared." "You don't have to stop. You just have to keep going anyway." Elijah kissed her forehead. "That's what brave is, being scared and doing it anyway." Clara closed her eyes, drew a deep breath, and let go. The fear didn't disappear. It probably never would not completely, but she could carry it. She could carry it the way she carried James's memory, the way she carried the faces of the children who hadn't survived. Some weights you didn't put down, you just learned to walk with them. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay." Elijah held her close. "That's my girl." Fall came early that year. The leaves turned gold and red and the air grew crisp. The children started their formal schooling gathering each morning around the big table Clara had bought with part of the settlement money. Ruth served as assistant teacher, helping the little ones with their letters, while Clara worked with Maggie and Tommy on arithmetic. It wasn't a real school. There were no desks, no chalkboard, no official curriculum. But it was theirs. One morning in late September, Robert Sullivan arrived for his quarterly visit. He'd been coming regularly since the custody hearing, keeping his promise to be part of Maggie's life without trying to take her away. Maggie ran to greet him, throwing her arms around his waist. "Uncle Robert, you came. Wouldn't miss it." Sullivan hugged her back, his weathered face softening. "Look at you. You've grown 3 inches since July." 2 inches, Maggie corrected. "Miss Clara measured me." "My apologies, 2 inches." Sullivan looked up at Clara, who'd followed Maggie onto the porch. "Mrs. Coulter, thank you for having me." "You're family now, Robert. You don't need to thank me." Something flickered in Sullivan's eyes. Gratitude, maybe, or something deeper. He spent the day with the children helping with chores, playing games, telling stories about Maggie's father. In the evening after dinner, he pulled Clara aside. "I have something for you," he said. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather box. Inside was a locket tarnished with age hanging from a thin gold chain. "It belonged to Maggie's mother," Sullivan said. "My brother gave it to her on their wedding day. I found it in her things after she passed." Clara opened the locket. Inside were 2 tiny photographs. A man and a woman, young and hopeful, looking at the camera with obvious love. "Maggie's parents," Sullivan said. "I thought she should have it." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Robert, this is... I know it's not much, but I wanted her to have something. Something to remember them by." Clara closed the locket carefully. "I'll give it to her tonight." "Thank you." Sullivan hesitated. "And thank you for what you've done. For all of them, but especially for Maggie. She's happy here. Really happy. I can see it in her eyes. She's an easy child to love." "She is." Sullivan smiled sadly. "My brother would have been grateful. So am I." That night, Clara gave Maggie the locket. The girl stared at the photographs for a long time, tracing her parents' faces with her finger. When she looked up, tears were streaming down her cheeks. "I was starting to forget what they looked like," she whispered. "I tried so hard to remember, but it was getting blurry." Clara pulled her close. "Now you'll never forget. I miss them. Even after everything, even with you and Pa, I still miss them." "Of course you do, sweetheart. That's not a betrayal. That's love." Maggie clutched the locket to her chest. "Can I wear it every day? Every day, for the rest of your life." Maggie fastened the chain around her neck. The locket hung over her heart right where it belonged. "Thank you, Mama," she said. Clara's breath caught. Maggie had called her Miss Clara for months, then Ma once or twice, but never Mama. "You called me Mama." Maggie's eyes widened. "Is that okay?" "It's more than okay." Clara held her daughter tight. "It's perfect." The first snow of winter came in early November. Clara woke to find the world transformed white and silent and new. She stood at the window watching the children tumble out into the cold, their laughter echoing across the frozen desert. Elijah came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Year ago today," he said quietly. "I know." A year since he'd stumbled through her door with Maggie in his arms. A year since they'd ridden through the blizzard to find 19 children locked in a wagon to die. A year since everything changed. "Any regrets?" Elijah asked. Clara watched Ruth building a snowman with the little ones. Watched Tommy throwing snowballs at William, actually laughing out loud. Watched Maggie catch snowflakes on her tongue, the locket glinting at her neck. "None," she said. "Not a single one. Even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts." Clara turned in his arms, facing him. "The hard parts made us who we are. They brought us together. They gave us this. A falling apart relay station and 9 mouths to feed. A home, a family, a future." Clara smiled. "Everything I never thought I'd have again." Elijah kissed her slow and sweet. "I love you, Clara Coulter." "I love you too, Elijah Coulter." They stood there for a moment, holding each other, watching their children play in the snow. Then Tommy's voice rang out. "Pama, come play with us." Elijah grinned. "Duty calls." They pulled on their coats and stepped outside into the cold. The snowball fight that followed was legendary. Children against adults, no mercy given or expected. By the end, everyone was soaked and freezing and laughing so hard they could barely breathe. That night, gathered around the fire, Clara looked at her family. Ruth was reading to the little ones, her voice low and soothing. Maggie and Tommy were playing checkers, arguing good-naturedly about the rules. Elijah was carving something from a piece of wood, his strong hands moving with surprising delicacy. And the other children, Sarah, Joseph, Emma, William, Mary, were scattered around the room talking, drawing, just existing in the warmth and safety of home. "Ma?" Maggie looked up from her game. "Will you tell us a story?" "What kind of story?" "A true story. About how we all became a family." Clara set down her mending. The children gathered around, even the older ones, settling into familiar positions. This had become their ritual story time by the fire, but Maggie had never asked for this particular story before. "All right," Clara said. "I'll tell you." She told them everything. The night Elijah arrived, the ride through the storm, the wagon in the snow, the siege, the trial, the fight to keep them all together. She didn't soften it or pretty it up. They deserved the truth. When she finished, the room was silent. Then Tommy spoke, his voice quiet but steady. "I used to think God forgot about us. When we were in that wagon, when the cold was so bad, we couldn't feel our fingers anymore, I thought. He'd left us behind." Clara's heart ached. "Tommy, but he didn't." Tommy looked at her, his dark eyes serious. "He sent you. And Mr. Coulter. He didn't forget us after all." Clara pulled him close. "No, sweetheart. He didn't forget you. And neither did I. Ruth cleared her throat. I have something to say too. Everyone turned to look at her. When I was in the orphanage before all this, I used to dream about having a family. A real family with a mother and a father and brothers and sisters. Ruth's voice shook. I thought it was just a dream. Something that happened to other people, not to orphans like me. She looked around the room at every face. But it wasn't a dream. It's real. We're real. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I never thought I'd have this. I never thought anyone would want me. Clara crossed the room and took Ruth's hands. We didn't just want you, Ruth. We needed you. You held this family together when I couldn't. You saved Maggie's life. You took care of the little ones when there was no one else. I was scared. We were all scared. That's what made it brave. Ruth threw her arms around Clara, sobbing. Clara held her tight, stroking her hair. You're home now, Clara whispered. You're home. One by one, the other children joined the embrace. A tangle of arms and tears, and whispered, I love yous, that seemed to go on forever. Elijah stood back watching. His eyes were suspiciously bright. Get over here, Clara said, reaching out her hand. He came, and for one perfect moment, they were complete. The years that followed weren't always easy. There were hard winters and dry summers. There were illnesses and injuries, and moments when money ran short. There were arguments and misunderstandings and growing pains of every kind, but there was also joy. Ruth graduated from school at 16, the first in the family to earn a diploma. She went on to become a teacher herself, returning to the territory to open a school for orphaned children. Maggie married at 19, a young rancher named Daniel, who looked at her like she'd hung the moon. They named their first daughter Clara. Tommy joined the Texas Rangers at 21, following in Elijah's footsteps. He became one of the most decorated marshals in the territory's history, famous for his dedication to protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The younger children grew up strong and kind, each finding their own path, each carrying the lessons Clara and Elijah had taught them. And Clara and Elijah themselves. They grew old together at the relay station, watching their children become adults, welcoming grandchildren and great-grandchildren into the home they'd built from nothing. On their 40th wedding anniversary, surrounded by 4 generations of family, Elijah raised a glass. To Clara, he said, the bravest woman I've ever known. Clara shook her head. I'm not brave. You stood alone against an army to protect children who weren't even yours yet. That wasn't bravery, that was stubbornness. Same thing in my experience. Elijah smiled, his gray eyes still bright despite the years. You saved us all, Clara. Every single one of us. And we've spent the last 40 years trying to be worthy of it. Clara looked around the room. At Ruth, gray-haired now, but still sharp. At Maggie, holding her newest grandchild. At Tommy, his ranger badge polished and proud on his chest. At all of them, these children she'd pulled from the snow and raised as her own. You are worthy, she said. Every single one of you. That's why I fought so hard. Because I saw what you could become. And what's that? Tommy asked. Clara smiled. Family. She passed peacefully in her sleep 3 years later at the age of 84. The funeral was the largest the territory had ever seen. People came from across the country to pay their respects, from governors to former orphans, from famous marshals to simple farmers. But it was Tommy who gave the eulogy. He stood at the front of the church, the wooden horse still in his pocket after all these years, and spoke about the woman who had saved his life. Clara Jennings Coulter was not a perfect woman, he said. She was stubborn and fierce, and sometimes she scared me half to death. But she was the best mother any of us could have asked for. Not because she was born to it, but because she chose it. She chose us when no one else would. She fought for us when no one else could. And she loved us every single day with everything she had. His voice broke. She used to tell me that heroes never feel like heroes. That bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing it anyway. Tommy wiped his eyes. She was scared a lot, I think. Scared of losing us. Scared of failing. Scared that she wasn't enough. He looked out at the congregation, at the sea of faces, at the family she had built. But she was enough. She was more than enough. And every one of us standing here today is living proof. Tommy reached into his pocket and pulled out the wooden horse. My sister made this before she died. She said it would protect me. He held it up, letting the light catch the worn wood. I gave it to Clara once to protect her. She gave it back when she didn't need protection anymore. He set the horse gently on the casket. Keep it now, Ma. I don't need it either. Because you taught me that the best protection isn't a weapon or a wall. It's love. And you gave us more than enough of that to last forever. The church was silent. Then slowly, one by one, people began to stand. First Ruth, then Maggie, then the younger ones, now all grown with children and grandchildren of their own. Then the strangers, the people Clara had helped over the years, the orphans who'd passed through her home and found hope. They stood for her, these hundreds of people whose lives she had touched. And in that moment, Clara Jennings Coulter was more alive than she had ever been. Because she wasn't just a memory. She was a legacy. And legacies never die. Elijah followed her 6 months later, passing quietly in the same bed where she had taken her last breath. They were buried side by side in a small cemetery behind the relay station that had become a legend. The headstone was simple, carved by Tommy's own hand. Clara and Elijah Coulter. They saved us all. But it was the smaller words beneath that told the real story. Parents, partners, heroes, and proof that love given freely can change the world. Years later, when Ruth was very old herself, a young journalist came to interview her about her famous mother. What do you remember most about Clara Coulter? The journalist asked. Ruth thought for a long time. Her hands, she finally said. They were rough from work, calloused and scarred. But when she held you, you felt like nothing in the world could ever hurt you again. And Mr. Coulter. His eyes, gray as winter sky. They'd seen terrible things, but when he looked at us children, they were soft, gentle, like he was seeing something precious. What do you think they'd want people to remember about them? Ruth smiled. That family isn't blood, it's choice. It's showing up day after day even when it's hard. It's fighting for each other when the world wants to tear you apart. She paused. They showed us that it doesn't matter where you come from or what you've lost. What matters is what you do with what's left. The journalist wrote it all down. One last question, she said. If you could say one thing to Clara and Elijah right now, what would it be? Ruth's eyes filled with tears. The same tears she'd shed at Clara's funeral, at Elijah's graveside, at every milestone they hadn't lived to see. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for finding us. Thank you for keeping us. Thank you for showing us what love looks like. She wiped her eyes. And thank you for proving that even the most broken things can become beautiful if someone just takes the time to put them back together. The journalist closed her notebook. That's a beautiful sentiment. It's not a sentiment, Ruth said firmly. It's the truth. The absolute, unshakable truth. And it was. Because Clara Jennings Coulter had walked into a blizzard to save children she didn't know, had stood against corruption and violence and despair, had built a family from the wreckage of tragedy. And in doing so, she had proven something that the world desperately needed to hear. That one person with enough love and enough courage can change everything. That broken children can become whole. That wounded hearts can heal. That hope once kindled can never truly be extinguished. And that sometimes the greatest heroes aren't the ones who ride into battle with guns blazing. They're the ones who open their doors in the middle of the night, take a dying child into their arms, and whisper 3 simple words that change everything. I've got you. Clara Jennings Coulter had those words carved into her soul. And because of her 9 children who should have died in the snow, lived full, beautiful lives instead. That was her legacy. That was her triumph. And that was the truth that would echo through generations long after the last person who remembered her face had gone. Some people are forgotten, but Clara Coulter never would be, because the family she built would carry her forward forever, passing her story from parent to child, from generation to generation. A story about love, a story about courage, a story about the unbreakable power of choosing each other no matter what. And that story, unlike the woman who lived it, would never end.